Join the bank that's best for your money. Nedbank. See money differently.
Global climate change stakeholders have been gathering in the United Arab Emirates since last week at the Cop28 Climate Summit in Dubai to debate and progress talks, agreements, pledges, financial implications and the status of action points to address sustainable development and what's been referred to as the importance of a just transition when it comes to the economic impact of developed and developing nations. Joining me now from Dubai is David Levinson, the head of responsible investment at Nedgroup Investments. David, thanks for joining us from Dubai. From your perspective, what kind of discussions are dominating the world's most prominent climate summit this year?
Firstly, good day and thanks for having me. Sorry if I'm looking a bit flustered. I just rushed back to the hotel after another full agenda at the COP meeting here, and it seems to be my same thoughts as I get off the train every day. It's been a long week of negotiations and learning and just really listening in. But in terms of the type of discussions that seem to be dominating the agenda, I think most of your viewers will be familiar with the political side. So, you get the likes of the rhetoric around phasing down and versus phasing out fossil fuels. There seems to be that lingering tension a little bit between the north and the southern countries around, loss and damage fund, which is obviously a good announcement at the start of the conference, but also where a lot of that responsibility lies and where a lot of that funding is going to come from. Another exciting sort of discussion point was the promise of around tripling renewable energy as we head towards 2030, but of course the implementation of that remains to be seen. But there have been also a lot of comments around these meetings generally. A lot of these policies have been cemented over where we now Cop28, the last 28 years, and it really is now the time to not just talk the talk, but also to walk the walk. And from the science community, the message has also been quite strong that we are overshooting or about to be overshooting the 1.5 degree climate warming target. So from a business perspective, and this is what's been quite fascinating for me, and your viewers might not be familiar with this side of the conference. So you have the political side, but then there's also the business community, civil society, action groups, NGOs, business councils, etc., having their own panel discussions and learning sessions on the sidelines within the blue zone of COP. And a lot of these sessions that I've attended anyway have been around things like carbon capture, carbon storage, and emission trading schemes, because I think these types of mechanisms are going to be quite important if we were to, like I mentioned, bring back down global warming beyond that 1.5 degree scenario.
Is the summit getting to the themes it's set out to deal with? There was much talk about earlier about taking stock, about action points.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'd imagine a parliamentarian or a politician might answer slightly different to the experience I've had over here, but it does seem like the conference started on the front foot and the back foot at the same time. So when I mean the front foot, obviously that massive sort of $1 billion injection towards the loss and damage fund, which I believe will be managed by the World Bank, still to be determined in terms of how that money gets fed out into the market and across the world for that matter. But also a lot of heightened scrutiny, obviously, on the COP president and his relations and links towards the oil industry for that matter. But I must say, from a South African perspective, I feel like despite all this noise, the SA Pavilion has moved quite pragmatically forward in a lot of those discussions. So keeping within the themes and the topics, something that's been quite interesting to view and try to better understand is the JET IP, or Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, how that mechanism is going to work in terms of the funding side of things. And another interesting one has actually been the human centricity for me being here this week. It's my first COP, and the rhetoric and the language being used around the social side of the energy transition is not unique just to the developing world, but the developed world as well. And that seems to be quite a strong message that I'm certainly taking away. So yeah, that along with the SA perspective, the human centricity. I've also attended a couple of sessions on water, which has actually apparently popped up for the first time at the conference. So really trying to understand that intersection of water, climate and trade, for that matter, has been quite interesting. So I think everything I've given you now, the South African Pavilion has been quite pragmatic despite all this noise, and really having some, what I think have been robust conversations and interesting to be a fly on the wall for.
David, finally, part of your portfolio includes responsible investment. How does that align with some of the ESG discussions taking place at the summit?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like the fact we're moving to the private sector side of things. I've attended some sort of passionate, let me call it, if I can't find a better word, debates around what corporates are required to do. So when I refer to corporates in the realms of responsible investing, I'm referring to listed entities. So that would be typically your JSE listed companies that we invest in. And the message has been strong. There have been two clear messages. The first around invest and offset, and the second around if you pollute, you must pay. So the first speaks to things like carbon pricing, investing in clean technologies, and also offsetting this. So it's been quite fascinating to learn about what carbon offsetting is and the type of carbon capture technologies out there. So whether it's a nature-based technology or a technology-based way of capturing carbon. So really calling to task companies that are maybe heavy emitters to look at how they can play a role in this, because as I mentioned, it's not just about bringing emissions down, but we actually need to remove a lot of those harmful greenhouse gas emissions that are in the atmosphere. And then you pollute, you pay. There have been some interesting regulatory discussions around things like carbon pricing as an incentive for businesses to move forward, but also certain regulatory mechanisms, such as what we've seen out of Europe, which is known as the CBAM, or the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which effectively looks to place a duty on import goods into the EU based on their carbon footprint. And I think this will become more meaningful for not just SA companies, but global companies. And whether we start seeing regulation like this unrolling in other parts of the world, I think will be material for companies specifically that we invest in. And maybe in conjunction with this is the topic around Scope 3 emissions. So historically, we look quite closely at Scope 1 and 2, and the world has got better at understanding those. So if we think about Scope 1 emissions through the lens of Nedbank, those will be our own emissions. In our work offices, for example, Scope 2 would be the power that we use, so what we buy from Eskom. And then Scope 3 would be something in terms of our supply chain or value chain down the line. And those can be quite large if you think of something like an oil producer. So there's Scope 1 and 2 from extraction and refining might be quite small relative to the Scope 3 emissions, which are getting burnt out there. So it's about understanding what type of emissions we are financing down the line. And then probably last but not least is, of course, technology and big data. And I attended an interesting expo today, a collaboration between Google and NASA, looking at how they can use different satellite data points to understand rivers and riparian zones across the world, which was incredibly fascinating to see, and the power that technology can bring. And my first thought when I saw this was it could have been a fascinating exercise during the drought that we saw in Cape Town. If we reflect on day zero in 2019, how powerful this data could have been in informing policy of the time, as well as how, governments, municipalities, provincial governments, for example, can actually plan strategically around something like water going forward.
David, fascinating. We're going to have to leave it there. I hope you enjoy the rest of Cop28.
Thank you. And look forward to getting home. It is nice and warm in the desert, which I think is maybe testament to the global warming we are experiencing. But thanks for having me.
Well, I guarantee you have more water there than we have in Joburg right now. So we hope you get back soon safely.
Cool. Thank you very much. Take care.
That was David Levinson, the head of responsible investments at Nedgroup Investments. Don't forget, you can catch more interviews on outcomes and insights from Cop28 right here on Business Day TV until the summit closes on Monday, 11 December.
Join the bank that's best for your money. Nedbank. See money differently.